All right, our next step is to build this, what we're calling a leg assembly. There's a reason we're putting these together. We're trying to minimize the number of mates we have to make manually. We're going to try to use that replicate command used with the screws on the skateboard. So this is our next milestone. We will create a short dowel assembly where we just put the washer, snug washer on the short dowel. We'll create this crank arm assembly. It'll move around like that, and then we'll finally put everything together like this. You should have your crankshaft parts, which is what you'll need for this, already created. So let's get started. So we'll move over to our, oops, that's not right. Frog. There we go. There's our crankshaft parts that we finished before. So we have an assembly tab here. We'll just rename it short dowel assembly. Okay, so short dowel is in the crankshaft parts, so we're just going to insert that from the crankshaft parts. We need the short dowel and put that there. We also need the snug washer. This is why we named everything. If you had not named everything yet, you'll want to do that. Oh, one more thing I think we should do before we continue too far into this, and that is to put some mates on the crankshaft parts, just like we did with the body and leg parts. Remember, K shows all these wonderful mates. So let's go into our crankshaft parts and add those mates. We pretty much just we need a lot of mates for this. Pretty much need them on every side of everything, I believe. Yeah, so let's just go ahead and add them. So we're just going to go find our mates, Alt-C, and we're going to go for mate here. All right, so let's just start at the top here. We're going to, remember, we put all of our mates toward the inside, so we're going to add that one. We'll flip it to the inside and be done with it. Control M does our mate connector. That one, and flip it. Same thing here. Put it on there. Oops, Control M first. And flip it. Just gonna go all the way through all these. Control M. And flip it. And here we go. Control M. And flip it. Control M. And flip it. Control M. Flip it. Control M. Flip it. Control M. Flip it. I do this on this side. Control M. I'm just going to go and do all the ones on this side. And then we'll do the other side. Flip it. And now we'll go to this side. Sometimes it's hard to see the ones you've already done. You can turn them all off if you want. But I don't remember which one. I got to do the washers and the dowels. There we go. Control M. Washers. Flip it. Control M. Other washer. Flip it. Control M. Sure. Flip it. Control M. Here, and flip it. A little tedious. It's going to save us a lot of work. Now we hit K, and we should be able to see them all. Okay. Now we have all of our mate connectors. Going to make this a lot easier. So short dowel assembly. Notice they show up automatically. Now the short dowel, we want to fasten it, and notice these are oriented this way, and I think just to make it easy, I want to orient them in the same way we did here, the crank arm assembly and the leg assembly to the top. we're going to be going to the left. So let's just orient them so that that dial is facing left on our assembly. So there's our left side. So we're going to attach this mate. So this is what's really nice. We would do a fasten mate. We're going to grab this mate here. Don't have to hover over any circles. We just pick our mates. Notice they turn orange there, or slight, I guess, brownish, orangish. Then connect that, and there we go. We fastened that. That's it for the short dowel assembly. We are going to use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of these, so it saves us some time to just make one and reuse it. Okay, next assembly we're going to use is the crank arm assembly. This is the crank arm, and we're just going to add 2 washers to it. And these washers are going to have some limits on them. They are cylindrical mates, so let's go and look at that. So we're going to make a new assembly. Create assembly. Going to call this, rename it to the crank arm assembly. Now you are going to want to make sure you rename these because when we go and use everything in our final assemblies, you're going to want to see where these are. So, and notice the preview sometimes doesn't update right away, so it might look a little bit different than what you got. Okay, so we're going to insert our crank arm. There's a crank arm, and we need how many loose washers? We need 2. 2 loose washers, so we can click on loose washer, and we'll put one here, and another loose washer we're going to put here. So now that we have those, we can mate them. Now these are going to be sliding on our dowels. Now there's no dowel there yet. It's a little easier to do all this without the dowels. You don't really need them until the very end. We want both sides to turn at the same rate. So we're going to do a cylindrical mate on these. That is cylindrical. And we're going to pick these mate connectors, that one and this one. Okay, so now we want this to slide. Notice there's a little axis here, X, Y, Z. We want it to slide on the Z axis, and the way we can do that, we can give it some limits. So the minimum Z we want it to be is 0. The maximum is what we're going to call a float. It's way down at the bottom here. Oh, right here. That's how much the washer is going to, what is referred to as movement in the Z axis here. It's called float, and that's going to be, in this case, 4 millimeters to start. Once we have that, we now have a floating washer. We could replicate this. In fact, let's try that. We're going to use replicate again. It's good to get some practice. So we want to replicate this instance, which is why we're doing things this way. So we want to replicate that washer, and we want to, no, I got replace. Sorry, replicate's behind my camera. Replicate. Okay, replicate this instance. Loose washer. We're gonna recreate the cylindrical mate, and we're gonna match individual edges because we don't want it to be on every. If we did the whole face, it would do both sides. So we want to match that edge right there, and now we have it over here too. So it is now a replicated loose washer. So we don't really need this one at all. Now, one thing I notice here is, yeah, the mates were hidden at first. If you hit K, they show up. We can delete that. So we're going to start using that replicate a lot more so that we don't have to recreate mates that we already did. So as you can see, this is how we want this to work. Okay, so now we're going to make the what I'm calling the leg assembly. This leg assembly, we'll use those. Notice there's that crank arm, It's a little bit, it slides around a little bit. We don't want to do what's called a fix on this yet. That we don't want to fix this leg. It's going to be, this leg will be completely floating. So some things won't drag just as well as you'd want them to, but I assure you that they do, or it is assembled correctly. So let's go and do this. We're going to go and create a new assembly. Create assembly, and we'll rename this the leg assembly. Again, it's going to be the right and left leg. So, and there we go. Now we got to bring our parts in, insert our parts. So we need our, let's see here. We need a leg, and we need that was in the part studio. So we got to flick it over to assemblies. We need our short dowel assembly. And we need the crank arm assembly. It's still generating a preview because I just made it. So now we only need one of these because we're going to use the replicate command again. It's a little hard to see that, so I'm going to turn off our mates. Okay, so we will, let's assemble everything on this side. All right, so you can get a general idea of how this is going to go together. This is going to go into there, and then we're going to mate that washer onto there, and hopefully we're going to have everything kind of floating around each other. So, oops, hang on, this is not right. This is going to go through here first, right? So let's get it put together first. So the first, kind of how you're going to assemble it in real life. First thing we want is this to go through here. And then we can use the replicate command to make another two of them. So we want to get a mate. Now we can show our mates, K. We want to mate, we want this is going to slide on here as well. So we want to get a cylindrical mate with a limit again. And that's going to be from here to, and we're going to click right on that mate. If you don't want to click on that circle, you want to click on the mate we made. So be careful you're not getting that. There's no need to use shift here. Just zoom in until you can make that mate turn slightly brown or yellow. Okay, so we have them selected, and you can confirm that you got the right mates if it's saying mate connector and then some number. If it just says mate of snug washer, then you probably didn't get it. So let's go for limits, 0 and hashtag float. It's called float. It's kind of like how it floats between the sides. And then now we should be able to move that. Notice we should be able to move that out, and it gives it a limit. So that is correct. So let's go and let's add let's add that to the rest of our holes in the side, and then we'll do the same thing with this assembly, and I'll show you how to do the whole assembly together. So we're going to replicate, which is right here, and we want to replicate the, now make sure you get the whole thing. This is where it's handy. We want to replicate the short dowel assembly. So I picked on it over here to make sure I got the whole thing. It found the mate that we want to replicate, and we should be able to use match find faces to actually, let's start with plane. We used that in the skateboard and it moved it over on us, but guess what? It's there. Recreated those mates and click the checkbox. Now they all should work just the same. And there we go. See how we're using the replicate to not, we had to put all those mates on by hand, but now it's going to be doing this for us, which is nice. Okay, so now we want to add the crank arm assembly. So we'll have to put one of them on, and then we're going to replicate that. So that is going to be mated to the face on here. So let's go ahead and make a cylindrical mate for that arm. We're going to pick this mate on the edge of this washer, and then we're also going to pick the mate Now be careful which mate you're picking. You want this one that's part of the face on the leg. Okay, we want to set a limit, and we put a 0, and we use the float. Should be able to just type float, and then click, and then it moved on us, but zoom out and you'll find it. Okay, so now if we move this around, everything should go like that. That's a working mate. Now we will have to do a final step to attach, to fasten this crank arm onto there, but that's an easy connection. We don't need to mate. We don't need to put limits. It's just a fasten mate, and it'll go really quick. What's hard is adding the limits and making sure you get those all right, not missing the 0 or the float. Hang on. All right, so we need to add 2 more of these. I thought replicate would work, but it is not. So we're just going to insert assemblies, crank arm assembly. We're going to insert two more of them. We'll just have to be careful about making those mates. And let's add them, and let's mate them. So we need another cylindrical mate between, I'm just going to actually, before we do that, let's pull these dowels out a little bit. Oh, never mind, I've mated them in there. We need to use that mate. So cylindrical mate, we're going to grab a mate between that mate and doesn't really matter which side you use. I'm just going to flip it for you. I'm grabbing this mate connector right there. Oh, we do need to flip it. Hang on. Oh, I did something on the wrong side there. Solve. Okay. Solve helps you see what you're actually doing. And I got that one right. So these flip axes, so sometimes things don't go on right. That's a good thing to show you. And you can flip the axes, this secondary and primary. So that's going to change the side you're on. All right, so let's go and add our next one. This is a nice, this second mate toolbar lets you start a new mate. So let's finish this off. Don't forget our limits, float. Here we go. And if we click this right here, we get to create a new one. So let's pick our other mate connector, which is this one. And just to make it easy on Onshape, we'll grab the right side, which is this side. And then we shouldn't have to flip anything around. It does break everything, so click solve, and it's on the wrong side. So we're gonna flip it over, solve. That was the wrong axis. This axis is what we want, solve. There we go. And now we want to put our limits in. Notice you can tell the limits aren't there. It's way out there, 0. And float. That should bring it into where it needs to go. And I have that on the wrong side, don't I? Yeah, it's totally on the wrong side. So we need to fix that last one. Flip it. There we go. You too might have this problem. So that's the way you fix those mates, is you flip it just like you did I guess mate connectors. So that should be correct. So let's see if it's all floating correctly. So we should be able to move that. Now we haven't fastened that on yet, so it's going to fall off. We'll do that last. And there we go. That's looking better. Just make sure you pay attention. There's a snug washer. This is a loose washer. It's between the crank arm and the side. If I pull this whole thing out, they should all float out like that. I'm going to get rid of my mates so it's a little easier to see. That's your check. If you pull on yours and it keeps going, then you have a problem. Okay, so last thing we want to do is we can put them all down like that. Ooh, kind of put them all, and it'll be easy to fasten these. So we're going to pick K, so our mates, and we're going to do a fasten mate. And this we might have to look real close. So we want to fasten, this is the mate on the crank arm to the end of the dowel. And we can just click on, there's no limits in there, we just click there, it starts another fasten mate, come up here. They've made it easy to do things fast with mates, since it seems to be generally a repetitive process. And now when we're all done, we can go back over here. All right, now that was a little tedious, but you can see where how to fix some problems you might have, which is good. We should have a ability to even spin these around. They should move. We can rotate them using this tool here. There we go. I'll show you that again. You can click on the, oops, so you can't click on it when you have a 2. Hit space bar. That's what that means, space bar. And now click here. You can grab this and rotate them. So they should move around. You can also use the arrows to move them this way, just like you've been doing before. They should all rotate. That means you use the cylindrical mates. Okay, so that's your check. Make sure everything is moving independently of each other. So the other one is, I noticed that once you get everything assembled, these washers don't like to slide, because there's this way, we'll do this with the body, of fixing a part and not letting it move. We don't want to do that with this, because we want this to move in our next assembly. That'll cause some problems there. But I noticed once you get those fasten mates in there, it doesn't look like it wants to move, but it actually is still floating. We'll check that on our final assembly. And with that, we are done with our short dowel, our crank arm, and our leg assembly. And we'll begin our final assembly in the next video.